Right now, as I speak to you, I am sitting on the wraparound deck of a beautiful cedarwood Airbnb tucked away in the Cascade Mountains. I have a heavy knit blanket over my lap, a blazing fire in the fire pit, and a generously poured glass of an absurdly expensive Merlot in my hand. I just checked my Apple Watch. It is exactly 6:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Back down in the Seattle suburbs, roughly 60 miles from where I am currently breathing the crisp mountain air, my 28-year-old daughter-in-law, Ashlyn, is hosting the most important networking event of her life. She's expecting 20 high-profile, influential guests, and more importantly, her insanely wealthy, hard-to-please Aunt Diane, who Ashlyn has been begging for seed money to fund her bogus lifestyle brand. Ashlyn expects everything to be perfect. She expects the 3 organic free-range turkeys to be perfectly roasted and resting on the kitchen island. She expects the vintage crystal to be polished. And above all, she expects me, her 62-year-old live-in mother-in-law / unpaid domestic servant, to be silently managing the kitchen, completely out of sight, so she can pretend this multi-million-dollar craftsman home and the perfect domestic life within it are entirely her own creation. Instead, I am on a mountain. I pick up my phone, open my smart home app, and smile. With 3 simple taps, I disable the primary Wi-Fi router. Then I log into the utility portal and turn off the smart thermostat. Finally, I disable the security cameras so she can't even see when or if I'm coming back. I take a slow, satisfying sip of my wine. Right about now, the absolute panic is setting in. And let me tell you, I have never felt a deeper, more profound sense of peace in my entire life. To understand how a 62-year-old widow ended up going completely scorched earth on her own family on Christmas Eve, we have to rewind. 4 years to be exact. 4 years ago, my husband Richard passed away suddenly from a massive heart attack. Richard and I had been married for 35 years. We built a beautiful life together. We bought our home in a gorgeous, tree-lined neighborhood back in the late 90s, paying off the mortgage with decades of hard work, late nights, and sensible budgeting. When Richard died, a massive part of me died with him. The house, which used to be filled with his booming laugh and the smell of his Sunday morning pancakes, suddenly felt like a tomb. I was drowning in grief, completely lost in the silence of my own home. That's when my son Tyler stepped in. Or at least that's when I thought he was stepping in to save me. Tyler was 27 at the time, freshly engaged to Ashlyn. They were living in a cramped, overpriced one-bedroom apartment downtown. A few weeks after Richard's funeral, Tyler sat me down at my kitchen table, held my hand, and gave me this whole speech. He told me he couldn't stand the thought of me being alone in this big house. He proposed that he and Ashlyn move in with me. "Just for a couple of years, Mom," he had said, his eyes full of that sincere, boyish charm I had always been so blind to. "We can keep you company, help around the house, and it'll give us a chance to save up for a down payment on our own place. It's a win-win." I was lonely, vulnerable, and desperate for the warmth of family. Like a fool, I said yes. I didn't charge them a dime of rent. I didn't ask them to pay for utilities. I just wanted my home to feel alive again. I didn't realize I was inviting a parasite into my sanctuary. From the moment Ashlyn moved her ridiculous amount of luggage into my guest suites, yes, suites plural, because she needed 1 room for sleeping and 1 for her content creation, the hostile takeover began. You see, Ashlyn is what you would call a micro-influencer. In reality, she's a chronically unemployed 28-year-old with an iPhone, a ring light, and a severe case of main character syndrome. Her entire personality is based on whatever TikTok aesthetic is trending that week. When she moved in, her brand was sad beige minimalist. Within a month, my home, the home Richard and I had painstakingly decorated with warm colors, vintage rugs, and a lifetime of souvenirs from our travels, was systematically sterilized. It started small. I'd come home from grocery shopping, which I paid for, of course, to find my colorful throw pillows replaced with lumpy oatmeal-colored linen sacks. Then the family photos disappeared. I came downstairs one morning to find Ashlyn boxing up the gallery wall in the hallway. Photos of Tyler's childhood, Richard and me on our honeymoon, our golden retriever who passed away a decade ago. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ashlyn didn't even look at me. She just kept taping up the cardboard box. "Oh, hey, Eleanor. I'm just decluttering. The visual noise in this hallway is really aggressive, and it's ruining the natural lighting for my morning routine vlogs. Don't worry, I put them all safely in the attic." I should have kicked her out right then. I should have drawn a hard line. But I was still so numb from Richard's death, and Tyler pulled me aside and begged me to let it go. "She's just trying to make it feel like home, Mom. She works so hard on her brand. Please, just compromise with her. Happy wife, happy life, right?" That phrase, happy wife, happy life. Tyler used it like a shield to protect himself from having a spine. Tyler is a software engineer. He makes good money. But he is entirely, pathetically conflict avoidant. He would rather watch his mother be emotionally bulldozed than have a 5-minute uncomfortable conversation with his wife. So I compromised. And by compromised, I mean I surrendered. By year 2, I was no longer a homeowner. I was the unpaid help on the set of The Ashlyn Show. My daily routine became dictated by her content calendar. If she was filming a day in the life of a busy entrepreneur video, I was banned from the kitchen from 8 a.m. to noon so she could film herself making matcha lattes and typing aggressively on a laptop that I'm pretty sure wasn't even turned on. But the real kicker? The absolute sheer audacity of it all? She couldn't actually cook, clean, or maintain the perfect domestic life she projected online. I was the one doing the laundry. I was the one scrubbing the quartz countertops. I was the one buying the expensive organic groceries she showed off in her grocery haul videos. I remember watching one of her Instagram stories where she twirled around my pristine living room, sighing into the camera, saying, "Keeping a massive house like this clean while running a business is so exhausting, you guys. But I just love taking care of my sanctuary." I had literally spent 3 hours that morning scrubbing the baseboards while she slept until 11 a.m. Whenever she had her influencer friends over for expensive brunches that she would force me to cook and plate, she would literally shoo me away. "Thanks for the help, Eleanor," she'd say, using that sickly sweet, high-pitched customer service voice she reserved for when the cameras were rolling. "We need to talk shop now, so if you wouldn't mind." And I would take my cup of coffee and retreat to my bedroom, listening to the shrieking fake laughter echoing from my dining room, eating the scraps of the quiche I had woken up at 6 a.m. to bake. I became a ghost. I tiptoed around my own hardwood floors. I stopped inviting my own friends over because Ashlyn complained they were too loud and ruined her focus. I watched my bank account slowly drain as I subsidized their luxury lifestyle, paying for the skyrocketing grocery bills, the utilities, the premium cable, the landscaping. All while Tyler bought Ashlyn a brand new Tesla because she needed a car that matched her eco-luxury aesthetic. I kept telling myself it was temporary. "They're saving for a house," I'd repeat like a mantra. "Tyler just needs a little more time." But the resentment was building. It was a slow, toxic drip in the back of my mind. Every time she handed me a dirty coffee mug without making eye contact. Every time Tyler looked away when she snapped at me. Every time I had to hide in my own bedroom so I wouldn't ruin her perfect, fake, curated life. The grief of losing my husband had morphed into something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. I was drowning, but I was waking up. And the final nail in the coffin, the moment that shattered the illusion and turned my quiet resentment into a calculated, ice-cold plan for destruction, happened exactly 3 weeks before Christmas. It was the morning of December 3rd, a classic, gloomy, rain-soaked Seattle Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchen, with the custom cherrywood cabinets Richard and I had installed for our 20th anniversary, enjoying a rare moment of absolute silence. I was sipping a freshly brewed dark roast, watching the rain hit the bay window, just trying to mentally prepare myself for another day of walking on eggshells in my own home. Then I heard the dreaded sound. Clack, clack, clack. Ashlyn's fuzzy, overpriced designer slippers smacking against the hardwood stairs. She came sweeping into the kitchen, radiating this manic, entitled energy. She was wearing her signature neutral-toned matching lounge set, her phone already recording some kind of morning vlog, murmuring into the camera about intention setting and manifesting abundance. Trailing behind her like a beaten-down golden retriever was my son, Tyler. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. He just shuffled over to the coffee maker, his shoulders hunched, staring intensely at the coffee grounds like they held the secrets of the universe. Instantly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew that posture. That was Tyler's "my wife is about to demand something outrageous, and I'm going to let her do it" posture. Ashlyn tapped her phone screen to stop recording and slammed her iPad down onto my pristine quartz countertop. She flashed me a bright, terrifyingly fake smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor, oh my God, perfect timing. Sit down, we have to talk logistics," she chirped, pulling out a bar stool and patting the seat next to her, as if she were inviting me to sit in her kitchen. I took a slow sip of my coffee, remaining standing. "Good morning to you too, Ashlyn. Logistics for what?" "For the Christmas Eve Winter Solstice Founders Dinner," she announced, throwing her hands up like she had just won an Oscar. "It is going to be the networking event of the decade. I've invited 20 of the most influential creatives and brand owners in the Seattle area. And, this is the best part, Aunt Diane officially RSVP'd yes." My stomach dropped. Aunt Diane, Gary and Brenda's older sister. She was a notoriously ruthless, self-made real estate mogul who lived in a gated community in Bellevue. She was also the primary target of Ashlyn's endless grifting. Ashlyn had been talking for months about pitching Aunt Diane a seed funding opportunity for her non-existent lifestyle brand. 20 people, I repeated slowly, my voice tight. On Christmas Eve. Ashlyn, that's 3 weeks away. That's a massive undertaking. Usually families just relax on— "Eleanor, please don't be negative. It totally ruins my frequency," Ashlyn interrupted, waving her manicured hand dismissively. She spun the iPad around to face me. On the screen was a meticulously color-coded, hyper-detailed Notion spreadsheet that looked like a Pinterest board had vomited all over it. "I've already planned the entire menu and the aesthetic. It's going to be rustic alpine luxury. I need you to order 3 heritage breed organic turkeys. Not the cheap grocery store ones, Eleanor, the ones from that farm upstate. I also want a standing rib roast, a vegan mushroom Wellington for my plant-based girlies, a truffled mac and cheese bar, and an 8-foot artisanal charcuterie grazing table right here on the island." She was reading it off like a grocery list, pointing a perfectly polished acrylic nail at the screen. "I've also included the recipes for 3 signature craft cocktails. You'll need to prep the edible glitter garnishes the night before. Oh, and the entire house needs a deep clean, like baseboards scrubbed, windows washed, the works. I want the lighting to be strictly ambient, so make sure all the taper candles are set up by 4 p.m. I stared at the screen, and then I looked at her. I waited for the punchline. I waited for her to say, "And here is the contact info for the catering company we hired." But the punchline never came. "Ashlyn," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Who exactly do you think is going to cook all of this, and serve it, and clean it up?" She looked at me like I was the stupidest person on earth. She actually let out a little condescending laugh. You? You're retired, Eleanor. You literally have nothing but time. Besides, everyone knows you love to cook. It's like your love language." "Cooking a holiday meal for my family is my love language," I corrected her, gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Cooking a 5-star catered banquet for 20 strangers so you can play pretend CEO is a full-time job." Her smile dropped. The sweet, chirpy influencer voice vanished, replaced by a cold, hard edge. "Listen, Eleanor, this is incredibly important for my career. Aunt Diane is ready to write a massive check for my brand, but she needs to see that I have my life together. She needs to see me as a successful, self-made woman who manages a beautiful estate." She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper that made my blood boil. "Which brings me to my next point. Aunt Diane, well, she kind of thinks this is our house, Tyler's and mine. I may have implied that we bought it last year, so it would be really confusing for her if you were acting like the lady of the house." The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't even speak. I just stared at her, my mouth slightly open. "So," Ashlyn continued, completely oblivious to the nuclear explosion happening inside my head, "I need you to basically be a ghost that night. You can prep everything in the kitchen, but when the guests arrive at 6, I need you to stay out of the living room and dining room. Honestly, it would be best if you just wore something totally neutral, like a black catering polo, and just brought the food out silently. Or better yet, just played it in the kitchen and stay in your room once dinner is served. My followers are going to be filming, and having my mother-in-law hovering around passing out napkins totally kills the young, successful boss babe vibe. Be a ghost, wear a catering polo, stay in your room in your own house. I slowly turned my head to look at my son, the boy I had carried for 9 months, the boy I had rocked to sleep when he had fevers, who I had cheered for at every miserable little league game, whose college tuition his father and I had sacrificed our own vacations to pay in full. "Tyler," I said. My voice didn't even sound like my own. It was a hollow, echoing sound. "Are you hearing this?" Tyler flinched. He finally looked up from the coffee maker, his face flushed with guilt, but he didn't stand up straight. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic he'd had since he was 7. "Mom, look, I know it's a big ask," Tyler mumbled, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "But it's just one night. Ashlyn's been really stressed about getting this funding. Diane is super judgy, you know that. If we just play along this one time, Ashlyn gets her investment and we can finally start looking for our own place. Just let her have this, okay? Please? We'll pay for the groceries." Spoiler alert, they did not pay for the groceries. I looked back and forth between the two of them. Ashlyn, with her chin jutted out, looking defiant and entitled. And Tyler, my spineless, cowardly son, begging his grieving mother to humiliate herself so he wouldn't have to deal with his wife's tantrums. For 4 years, I had made excuses for him. I told myself he was just young, just navigating a new marriage, just trying to keep the peace. But standing there in my kitchen, staring at the pathetic man he had become, the final tether snapped. He didn't love me enough to protect me. He only loved what I could do for him. I wasn't a mother to him anymore. I was a fully depreciated household appliance. If I had exploded right then, if I had screamed and thrown them out, they would have called me crazy. Ashlyn would have spun a narrative on TikTok about her toxic, boomer mother-in-law. Tyler would have played the victim. So I didn't scream. The boiling rage inside me suddenly flash froze. A strange, eerie sense of absolute clarity washed over me. The sadness was gone. The grief over losing the son I thought I had was replaced by a cold, calculating instinct for survival. I looked at the notion board on the iPad. I looked at Ashlyn's smug face. "Okay," I said quietly. Ashlyn blinked, clearly surprised that I had caved so easily. "Okay? You'll do it?" "I'll do it," I said, forcing the corners of my mouth up into a chillingly placid smile. "Send me the list. I'll make sure your Christmas Eve is exactly what you deserve." "Oh my gosh, thank you, Eleanor," Ashlyn squealed, clapping her hands together, the fake persona instantly snapping back into place. "You're a lifesaver. Seriously, this is going to be epic." She grabbed her iPad and trotted back upstairs, already talking to her camera again. Tyler gave me a weak, pathetic smile, whispering a quick, "Thanks, Mom," before scurrying after her like an obedient lapdog. I stood alone in the kitchen. I took a deep breath, walked over to the island, and picked up my cold coffee. I poured it down the sink. I was going to give them a Christmas Eve they would never, ever forget. But first, I needed to figure out exactly how deep Ashlyn's delusions went. And as fate would have it, the universe handed me the key to her destruction just 3 days later, sitting right at the bottom of my recycling bin. 3 days after the kitchen confrontation, the universe decided I had played the role of the submissive, blind mother-in-law for long enough. It was a Friday morning, which meant it was trash day in our neighborhood. It was pouring rain, as usual, and Tyler had conveniently forgotten to drag the bins to the curb before he left for his office. Ashlyn, of course, was already gone. She had announced earlier that morning that she had a grueling day of content batching, which consisted of a 9 a.m. Pilates class, followed by an $8 matcha latte with another aspiring influencer. So there I was, a 62-year-old widow in a yellow raincoat dragging a heavy blue recycling bin down the wet driveway. As I hit the bottom of the driveway, the bin jolted over a bump, and a few items spilled out the top. I bent down to pick them up. An empty oat milk carton, a crumpled Amazon Prime envelope, and a thick, slightly damp envelope that had been shoved inside an empty LaCroix box. I picked it up to toss it back in, but the red ink stamped across the front caught my eye. Final notice, Midland Credit Management. My stomach gave a little lurch. Midland is a collection agency, a very aggressive one. I knew this because a friend of mine had dealt with them years ago after a messy divorce. I looked at the name printed in the little cellophane window, Tyler J. Vance. I stood there in the rain, the cold water dripping off my hood, staring at my son's name. Tyler made roughly $140,000 a year as a senior software developer. They didn't pay rent. They didn't pay utilities. They barely bought their own groceries. How on earth could my son have an account in collections? Now, I am a firm believer in privacy. I raised Tyler to respect boundaries, and I always tried to respect his. But my instincts were screaming at me. The envelope was already half torn, likely ripped open in a panic and hastily shoved into the recycling bin to hide it. I slid the letter out. Account balance, $42,750.80. Status, delinquent. 90 days past due. $42,000. I felt dizzy. I scanned the itemized list attached to the back. It wasn't a student loan or a medical bill. It was a Chase Sapphire Reserve credit card statement. And the charges? Revolve Clothing, Sephora, West Elm, a boutique PR agency in Los Angeles, a luxury Medispa in downtown Seattle, thousands of dollars on Botox, lip fillers, designer clothes, and fake Instagram followers. This wasn't Tyler's debt. This was Ashlyn's lifestyle. But she had opened the card in Tyler's name. I shoved the letter into my raincoat pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs. I practically sprinted back up the driveway and into the house. I locked the front door, peeled off my wet coat, and marched straight upstairs to the influencer suites. I had avoided these rooms for months. Whenever I had to clean them, I did it quickly, keeping my head down. But today, I wasn't the maid. I was a detective. I pushed open the door to Ashlyn's office. Online, her workspace looked like a minimalist dream. A sleek acrylic desk, a single fiddle-leaf fig tree, and a perfectly placed MacBook. But outside the tight frame of her camera lens, the room was a chaotic, hoarding nightmare. There were PR boxes piled to the ceiling, clothes with the tags still on thrown over chairs, and half-empty iced coffee cups leaving water rings on my antique side tables. It was the physical manifestation of her mind, a curated lie covering up a massive, messy reality. I started digging. I didn't care about the mess. I went straight for the white woven aesthetic baskets she kept on her bookshelf, the ones labeled with cute, loopy calligraphy that said dreams and taxes. I pulled down taxes and dumped the contents right onto her plush Moroccan rug. It was a treasure trove of absolute financial ruin. There were dozens of credit card statements, not just the Chase card. Capital One, American Express, Discover, all maxed out. All in Tyler's name. I found personal loan documents with exorbitant interest rates. By my quick mental math, sitting there on the floor, Ashlyn had racked up nearly $90,000 in consumer debt over the last 3 years. I felt sick to my stomach. Tyler's credit score had to be entirely destroyed. Did he know the full extent of this? Did he know she was using his social security number to fund her delusions of grandeur? But the worst was yet to come. At the bottom of the pile, shoved inside a glossy folder from a local real estate brokerage, was a thick manila envelope. The return address was a local credit union, not my usual bank. I opened it, pulling out a stack of legal-sized paper. The header read, Home Equity Line of Credit, HELOC Application. I frowned, my eyes scanning the document. A HELOC is a loan that allows you to borrow money against the equity of your house. To get one, you have to be the legal owner of the property. I looked at the property address listed on the form, 1402 Sycamore Drive. My house. The house Richard and I had paid off entirely before he died. The house where I brought Tyler home from the hospital. The house that was the only financial security I had left in the world. My hands began to shake violently as I flipped to the second page. The requested loan amount was $150,000. Under purpose of loan, someone had typed, Home Renovations and Small Business Startup Capital. I flipped to the last page, the signature page. There, on the bottom line designated for the primary property owner, was my name, Eleanor M. Vance. But it wasn't my signature. It was an embarrassingly bad forgery. The loops were too bubbly. The slant was all wrong. It was Ashlyn's unmistakable, loopy influencer handwriting, desperately trying to trace over a copy of my signature, probably lifted from a voided check or an old piece of mail. The air left my lungs. The room started to spin. She wasn't just a spoiled brat using me for free catering and rent. She was an active, malicious predator. She was trying to steal $150,000 of my dead husband's life savings right out from under me. If this went through, if she defaulted, which she absolutely would, given her track record, the bank could foreclose on my house. I could be left homeless. Panic gripped me by the throat. Oh my God, did she get the money? Is my house already mortgaged? I frantically shuffled through the rest of the papers in the envelope, my breathing shallow and fast. I found a letter stapled to the very back of the application. It was dated 2 weeks ago. Dear Mrs. Vance, thank you for your recent application. At this time, we are unable to proceed with the underwriting process. As per our fraud prevention policies, a HELOC application of this size requires the primary deed holder to verify their identity and sign the final disclosures in person with a certified notary at one of our branch locations. Please contact us to schedule an appointment. I dropped the papers on the floor and let out a sob of sheer relief. The bank had stalled it. Her sloppy, desperate attempt at identity theft had hit a bureaucratic wall because she couldn't physically drag me into a bank and force me to sign in front of a notary. My house was safe. For now. I sat there on the floor for a long time. The panic slowly drained out of my system, leaving an empty, hollow space behind. But that space didn't stay empty for long. It was quickly filled with an inferno, a cold, calculated, terrifying rage. I picked up the forged document. I stared at the fake signature. This girl had moved into my home, eaten my food, treated me like dirt, and then tried to rob me blind. And my son, my sweet, passive Tyler, was either the biggest idiot on the planet, or he was complicit. I realized in that moment that crying wasn't going to fix this. Yelling at them wouldn't fix this. Ashlyn was a master manipulator. If I confronted her with these papers, she would cry, play the victim, gaslight me, and Tyler would defend her. She would probably claim she was just researching options for my benefit. No, I couldn't just confront her. I had to destroy her. I had to rip away the only thing she actually cared about, her fake, perfectly curated public image. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the camera app. Snap. I took a photo of the forged HELOC application. Snap. I took a photo of the bank denial letter. Snap, snap, snap. I photographed every single maxed out credit card statement, every late fee, every collection notice. I created a hidden album on my phone and titled it Christmas Eve. Then I meticulously packed everything back into the aesthetic woven baskets. I placed them exactly where I had found them. I smoothed out the Moroccan rug. I left the room exactly as the chaotic mess it had been. I walked downstairs, my posture straighter than it had been in 4 years. I felt alive. I felt dangerous. Ashlyn wanted a perfect Christmas Eve founder's dinner? She wanted to impress Aunt Diane and 20 influencers with her fake wealth? Fine. I would give her exactly what she asked for. I would be the ghost. I would disappear. But I was going to leave a haunting behind that would burn her entire fake empire to the ground. But first, I needed a professional. I needed someone to dig into the digital dirt that I couldn't access. I needed a private investigator. By the time Monday rolled around, I had a plan. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. If I went to the police with a rejected forged HELOC application, it would just be my word against Ashlyn's. She'd cry, claim it was a misunderstanding, or worse, Tyler would step in and take the blame to protect her. I needed an airtight, bulletproof dossier of her entire life. I needed the kind of receipts that couldn't be gaslit away. I needed a professional. Through a friend of a friend who had gone through a particularly nasty, high-asset divorce, I got the number for a private investigator. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus was an ex-Seattle PD detective who specialized in corporate fraud, hidden assets, and apparently exposing digital con artists. I met Marcus at a bleak, fluorescent-lit diner 2 towns over, so there was zero chance of running into anyone I knew. I slid the manila folder containing the photos of the maxed-out credit cards and the forged HELOC application across the sticky laminate table. Marcus, a burly guy in his 50s who looked like he survived entirely on black coffee and cynicism, flipped through the printed photos. He didn't even blink at the $90,000 in consumer debt, but when he saw the forged signature on the bank loan, he let out a low whistle. "Identity theft and mortgage fraud," Marcus muttered, tapping the paper. "She's not just playing house, Mrs. Vance. She's playing with federal offenses. What do you want me to do?" "I want to know everything," I told him, my voice steady. "I want to know where the money goes. I want to know who these 20 influencer friends are that she's bringing into my home on Christmas Eve. And I want to know exactly how her little online business actually operates, because from where I'm sitting, her business model consists entirely of stealing my money to buy beige throw pillows." Marcus gave a grim chuckle. "Give me 4 days." He only needed 3. That Thursday, I was sitting in my car in a Target parking lot when Marcus called. He told me he had emailed me a secure encrypted file, but he wanted to walk me through the highlights because, in his words, "You can't make this kind of crazy up." I opened my iPad, connected to the car's hotspot, and opened the PDF. It was 40 pages long. "Okay, Eleanor, let's start with the basics." Marcus's voice crackled through my car's Bluetooth. "Your daughter-in-law's influencer career? It's a total mirage, a complete fabrication." "I figured that much," I scoffed. "She doesn't actually do anything all day except film herself drinking tea." "No, you don't understand," Marcus corrected me. "I mean, literally everything is fake. She has 85,000 followers on Instagram, right? My software ran an audit on her account. Over 70,000 of those followers are bots purchased from click farms in Russia and Brazil. She's paying a subscription fee of about $400 a month, using your son's credit card naturally, just to maintain a fake audience." I stared at the screen, bewildered. "But what about the comments? People are always commenting on her videos, telling her how inspiring she is, asking where she bought her outfits." "Engagement pods," Marcus explained. "It's a scam where a bunch of these fake girl bosses join a private group chat. Whenever one of them posts, they all rush to like and comment on each other's stuff to trick the algorithm. It's a giant digital circle jerk. None of those PR packages she opens on camera are sponsorships. She buys the products herself, films an unboxing, and tags the brands hoping they'll notice her. They never do." I felt a bizarre mix of validation and secondhand embarrassment. Ashlynn's entire existence was a pathetic, carefully constructed stage play, and she was the only one in the audience. She was a textbook fake guru, pretending to have wealth and success so she could, what? Get more fake followers? If she's not making any money, why is she doing all this? I asked, rubbing my temples. Just for an ego trip? "Ego is part of it," Marcus said, his tone shifting. "But this is where it gets incredibly sinister. Scroll down to page 12 of the report." I swiped on the iPad. The page was a screenshot of a website. It was beautifully designed in Ashlynn's signature minimalist aesthetic. Muted earth tones, elegant serif fonts. At the top, in large letters, it read, "The Abundant CEO, Exclusive Winter Solstice, Mastermind Retreat." "What is this?" I breathed. "This, Eleanor, is the Christmas Eve dinner you've been ordered to cook for," Marcus said dryly. "I found the link buried in a private Facebook group for aspiring female entrepreneurs. Your daughter-in-law isn't hosting a networking event for her friends. She is hosting a ticketed seminar." I zoomed in on the screenshot. My jaw practically unhinged. There was a photo of my living room, the one she had staged and forced me to hide from, promoted as our luxury founder's estate. The itinerary promised an evening of high-frequency networking, a 5-star organic farm-to-table banquet, and an exclusive pitch workshop. And right at the bottom was the investment tier. General admission, $250. VIP Founders Tier, includes one-on-one coaching session, $450. The event was sold out. 20 women had bought tickets. She is charging them, I whispered to myself, the sheer magnitude of the grift washing over me. She is charging 20 gullible women up to $450 each to come eat my food, cooked in my kitchen, paid for with my grocery budget, in my house. Yep, Marcus confirmed. She's pocketing roughly $6,000 in pure profit, but that's just the appetizer. The main course is her Aunt Diane. I dug into Diane's business holdings. Diane runs an angel investor syndicate. From what I can tell, Ashlyn is using this fake, sold-out mastermind retreat as a prop. She's going to use this event to prove to her aunt that she has a viable, lucrative coaching business, so Diane will write her a massive $50,000 seed check to scale her brand. It was evil. It was sociopathic. But from a purely criminal standpoint, it was almost impressive. Ashlyn had constructed a financial house of cards, and I was the foundation. She was using my house as her fake luxury backdrop. She was using my free labor as her catering service. She had maxed out my son's credit to buy the aesthetic wardrobe and the fake followers. And when the credit cards ran dry, she had tried to forge my signature to steal $150,000 from the equity of my home to keep the scam going. She was a parasite, sucking the lifeblood out of my family to fuel her delusion. "Eleanor?" Marcus's voice broke through my raging thoughts. "You still there?" "I'm here," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Marcus, do you have a way to download a list of the women who bought tickets to this event?" "Already did. It's on page 15, along with their email addresses and Instagram handles." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just been handed the remote control to a demolition site. "Thank you, Marcus. You have been worth every single penny." "What are you going to do?" he asked, sounding genuinely curious. "I'm going to let her host her little mastermind," I said, putting the car in gear. "But first, I need to have a very difficult conversation with my son. I need to know exactly how much of this rot he's aware of." If Tyler was a victim in all this, if he truly had no idea his credit was ruined, his identity was stolen, and his wife was running a digital Ponzi scheme out of his mother's living room, I would protect him. I would help him pack his bags, hire him a ruthless divorce attorney, and we would burn Ashlyn together. But if he knew? If he knew she was trying to steal my house and scam these women, and he was just turning a blind eye because it was easier than confronting his tyrant of a wife? Well, then he was going to burn right alongside her. I pulled out of the Target parking lot, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. It was time to find out if the boy I raised was a man or just an accomplice. I texted Tyler and told him to meet me at a small independent coffee shop near his office park in Bellevue. I made sure to pick a place Ashlyn would never step foot in. A little indie joint with mismatched chairs, zero aesthetic lighting, and absolutely no matcha on the menu. I arrived 20 minutes early. I ordered a black tea, sat in a corner booth facing the door, and waited. My purse sat heavily on my lap, containing a slim manila folder with copies of the collection notice, the maxed-out credit card statements, and the forged HELOC application. I was praying desperately that Tyler would be shocked. I wanted to see his jaw drop. I wanted to see the anger in his eyes when he realized the woman he married had stolen his identity and tried to steal his mother's house. I was ready to wrap my arms around him, tell him we would hire the best divorce attorney in the state, and fix this together. At 12:15 p.m., Tyler walked through the door. He was wearing his usual tech bro uniform, a Patagonia fleece, jeans, and tired dark circles under his eyes. He spotted me, gave a weak wave, and slid into the booth across from me. "Hey, Mom," he said, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on? You sounded serious on the phone. Is everything okay with the house for the dinner?" The dinner. Always the damn dinner. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask about his day. I unzipped my purse, pulled out the manila folder, and slid the Midland Credit Management collection notice across the scratched wooden table. "I found this in the recycling bin," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's in your name, Tyler. It's for $42,000. Tyler looked down at the paper. I waited for the shock. I waited for the confusion. Instead, he just squeezed his eyes shut and let out a long, pathetic sigh. His shoulders slumped forward. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had been caught hiding a bad report card. "Mom, you weren't supposed to see that," he mumbled, pushing the paper back toward me without meeting my gaze. The first crack in my heart appeared. "I wasn't supposed to see it?" I repeated slowly. "Tyler, this is a final collection notice. You are drowning in debt. And I know it's not yours. I know it's Ashlyn's. I know she opened these cards in your name." "She didn't do it maliciously," he snapped, a sudden defensive edge entering his voice. He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't betrayal. It was desperation. "Mom, you don't understand how her industry works. It takes money to make money. She has to maintain a certain image to get brand deals. It's an investment in her business." "Her business?" I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. I slid the PI's printout of the Mastermind Retreat ticketing page across the table. "You mean this business? The one where she's charging 20 gullible women $450 a head to eat the food I am paying for, cooked in my kitchen, while pretending my house is her founder's estate?" Tyler paled. He stared at the printout, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. How did you find this?" "It doesn't matter how I found it. What matters is that your wife is running a scam, Tyler. And worse, she is running it out of my home." I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a harsh whisper. "Tell me you didn't know about this. Tell me you didn't know she was selling tickets to a fake seminar." Tyler looked down at his hands. He picked at a loose thread on his fleece. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating, until he finally spoke. "I knew she was charging them a small fee to cover materials," he mumbled. "But the real play is Aunt Diane. Mom, Diane is looking to invest. Ashlyn has a whole pitch deck ready. If Diane sees this event, if she sees that Ashlyn has paying clients and a solid brand, Diane is going to write a $50,000 seed check." The second crack in my heart splintered deep. "You want to scam your own aunt," I stated, staring at him as if he were a total stranger. "You are letting your wife put on a theatrical production to con your Aunt Diane out of $50,000 so you can pay off the credit card debt Ashlyn racked up buying fake Instagram followers." "It's not a con," Tyler hissed, looking around the coffee shop nervously. "Once Ashlyn gets the seed money, her business will actually take off. She just needs the capital to start. And if she gets that check, Mom, we can pay off the debt. We can finally afford a down payment. We can move out of your house." There it was, the carrot dangling on the stick. "We can move out of your house." He was trying to bribe me with my own freedom, using money stolen from his aunt. "Tyler," I said, my voice trembling now, not from sadness, but from a terrifying, icy realization. I reached into the folder one last time. I pulled out the photograph of the home equity line of credit application. I placed it gently on the table, right on top of the collection notice. "And what about this?" I asked softly. "Was this an investment too?" Tyler looked at the photo. His eyes scanned the document, landing on the bottom right corner, on my forged signature, the blood completely drained from his face. For a second, he looked genuinely terrified. "Mom, I haven't seen this. I swear to God I didn't know about this." "She tried to take out a $150,000 loan against my house, Tyler. She forged my signature. That is a federal crime. That is identity theft and mortgage fraud. The bank denied it because she couldn't get me to a notary, but she tried to steal my home, my only financial security." I waited. This was the precipice. This was the moment of truth. My son had just discovered his wife had committed a felony against his own mother. Any decent man, any loving son would have flipped the table. He would have called the police. He would have begged my forgiveness for bringing this monster into my home. Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at the forged signature, then looked up at me with eyes full of pathetic, cowardly tears. "Mom, she's just desperate," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She's been so stressed about the debt. She wasn't thinking straight. She would never have let you lose the house. She just needed a bridge loan. Stop! The word left my mouth like a gunshot. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the air with absolute lethal precision. Tyler snapped his mouth shut. My heart didn't break in that moment. It didn't shatter into a million pieces. It simply stopped beating for the boy sitting across from me. It turned to stone. He was defending her. He was rationalizing a felony. He was so terrified of his wife, so deeply entrenched in her toxic, delusional world, that he was willing to sacrifice his own mother on the altar of her aesthetic. He wasn't a victim. He was a willing accomplice. He was the getaway driver for the woman robbing me blind. "Mom, please," Tyler begged, reaching across the table to grab my hand. I pulled it back immediately, repulsed by his touch. "Please, don't go to the cops. Don't blow this up. I promise you, after Christmas Eve, it's over. If she gets Diane's check, we will pay everything off and we will leave. I swear on Dad's grave. Just endure it this one last time. Make the dinner. Be the ghost she wants you to be. Help us get that check, and you'll never have to deal with this again. Just endure it this one last time." I looked at Tyler. I tried to find the little boy who used to help me plant tomatoes in the garden. I tried to find the teenager who cried on my shoulder when he didn't make the varsity soccer team. I tried to find my husband Richard's strong jaw and kind eyes. But there was nothing left. Just a hollow, cowardly shell of a man who was asking me to be complicit in a fraud, to cook the meal for his wife's scam, and to smile while she handed me the bill. I took a slow, deep breath. The emotional tether, the fierce, unconditional maternal instinct that had bound me to this boy for 31 years, evaporated into thin air. I felt incredibly light. I felt incredibly dangerous. I gathered the papers on the table. I stacked them neatly and placed them back into the manila folder. I slipped the folder into my purse and stood up. "Okay, Tyler," I said, looking down at him with a placid, terrifyingly empty smile. Tyler let out a massive breath of relief, scrubbing his hands over his face. "Oh my God, thank you, Mom, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me. I promise the dinner is going to be perfect. You just prep the food, stay upstairs, and we'll handle the rest." "Oh, I know," I said smoothly, pulling my coat tighter around my shoulders. "I'm going to give Ashlyn exactly the Christmas Eve she deserves. See you at home." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the bell above the door chiming merrily behind me. I didn't shed a single tear as I walked to my car. I didn't feel grief anymore. I was completely, blissfully numb to the loss of my son. Because I wasn't a grieving mother anymore. I was a homeowner with an infestation. And it was time to call the exterminator. I didn't drive home after I left Tyler at the coffee shop. I sat in my car in the parking lot for exactly 5 minutes, letting the final, pathetic image of my son burn itself into my memory. Then, I put the car in drive, pulled out onto the highway, and headed straight for downtown Seattle. I had an appointment with a man named Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a senior partner at a very old, very intimidating estate planning firm. Richard and I had used him decades ago to draft our original wills. Unlike Ashlyn, who desperately tried to project wealth with beige linen and ring lights, Arthur's office smelled of actual generational money, old mahogany, leather-bound books, and freshly brewed espresso. I sat across from his massive desk, opened my purse, and handed him the manila folder. I watched his silver eyebrows climb higher and higher up his forehead as he reviewed the forged HELOC application, the bank denial letter, and the collection notices. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me with a mixture of professional concern and absolute disgust. "This is textbook mortgage fraud and identity theft. If this had gone through, you could have lost your home. I strongly advise we contact the authorities immediately." "We will," I replied, crossing my legs. "But not today. Today, Arthur, I need to make sure that even if I am hit by a bus tomorrow, my son and his wife never see a single dime of my husband's legacy." Arthur leaned back in his leather chair. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer me pity. He just nodded, picking up a gold fountain pen. "Tell me exactly what you want to do." "I want to put the house, my investments, and all of my remaining liquid assets into an irrevocable trust, I instructed. I want to be the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. Upon my death, the assets are to be liquidated and donated entirely to the Seattle Animal Rescue. Tyler is to be explicitly disinherited, with a clause stating he receives exactly $1, just so he can't contest the will by claiming I simply forgot him. Arthur's pen flew across his legal pad. An irrevocable trust is airtight, Eleanor. Once it's funded, the assets are legally owned by the trust, not you. It means Ashlyn could forge your signature 100 times over, and the bank would laugh in her face because you technically don't own the house anymore. The trust does. Exactly, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. And Arthur, there's one more thing. I need a formal, legally binding 30-day notice of eviction drafted for Tyler and Ashlyn Vance. I want it printed on your most intimidating firm letterhead. Arthur actually smiled. It was a sharp, predatory grin. It will be ready in an hour. Washington state law requires 30 days for established tenants, even if they don't pay rent. But after those 30 days, if they aren't gone, we call the sheriff to physically remove them. Perfect. As I sat in the plush waiting room drinking sparkling water while Arthur's paralegals drafted the documents, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, the private investigator. Check your email. Found the missing piece of the puzzle. You're going to want to sit down for this one. I opened my email app. Marcus had sent over a zip file containing dozens of screenshots. But these weren't bank statements. They were text messages. I called him immediately. Marcus, what am I looking at? Ashlyn is sloppy, Eleanor, Marcus said, the amusement clear in his voice. She backed up her old iPhone to the shared family iCloud account, the one your son pays for. I managed to pull her iMessage history. Look at the thread with her father, Gary. I opened the first screenshot. It was a conversation from 2 months ago, right around the time the collection agencies started calling Tyler. Ashlyn. Dad, I'm freaking out. The chase card is maxed. If Diane doesn't give me the seed money at the solstice dinner, I'm dead. Tyler is starting to ask questions about the mail. Gary. Calm down, sweetie. You're a CEO. Act like one. What about the old lady's house? You said it's paid off. Must be worth $1.5 million in that zip code. Ashlyn. She won't sell. She's obsessed with this stupid house. And Tyler is too much of a wimp to ask her to put my name on the deed. Gary. Then don't ask. Just keep wearing the boy down. He's soft, just like his father was. You get him on your side, and you tell him it's for his own future. Once her name is off the deed, or you get a power of attorney, we can leverage the equity to clear your boards. Just don't let her stall you. We need this too, Ash. Your mother's car is getting repossessed next week. The phone nearly slipped out of my hand. We need this too. It wasn't just Ashlyn. It was a family of grifters. Gary and Brenda, who always showed up to family events in designer clothes, turning their noses up at my homemade casseroles. They were broke. They were drowning in debt, just like their daughter. And Gary, a grown man, was actively coaching his daughter on how to manipulate my spineless son into stealing my home so they could all profit. They thought I was a stupid, grieving old woman they could bleed dry. You see it? Marcus asked quietly. I see it, I whispered. My vision actually blurred for a second, not from tears, but from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Marcus, Ashlyn's Aunt Diane. She's Gary's sister, right? Older sister, self-made. And rumor has it she absolutely despises Gary because he's been begging her for handouts his entire life. Diane is a shark, Eleanor. She doesn't tolerate scammers. No, I said, my voice hardening into steel. I don't imagine she does. Marcus, thank you. I hung up the phone. I marched back into Arthur's office, signed the trust documents, and tucked the crisp, terrifyingly official eviction notice into my purse. I felt like I was wearing a suit of armor. I was legally untouchable. Now it was time to prepare the feast. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of the obedient, invisible mother-in-law to absolute perfection. When Ashlyn breezed into the kitchen to check on my progress for the VIP Founders Dinner, I smiled warmly. I let her dictate the ambient lighting schedule. I let her remind me, ad nauseum, that I was not to be seen by the guests. "Don't worry, Ashlyn," I would say, wiping down the countertops. "I promise you won't even know I'm here." 3 days before Christmas Eve, I took Ashlyn's ridiculous color-coded Notion spreadsheet to the grocery store. She had requested 3 organic, heritage-breed free-range turkeys from a boutique farm upstate. Those would run about $120 each. I went to a discount warehouse club. I marched straight to the frozen aisle and hauled 3 generic, heavily processed, bowling ball-sized frozen turkeys into my cart. They were $14 apiece. They were frozen so solid you could use them to break a car window. She had requested an artisanal charcuterie grazing table featuring imported French brie, truffle honey, and prosciutto di Parma. I bought 3 boxes of generic Ritz crackers, a massive block of processed neon orange cheddar, 2 cans of imitation spray cheese, and a gigantic log of discount bologna. She requested a vegan mushroom Wellington made with wild-foraged chanterelles. I bought a $4 frozen microwavable black bean burger. I loaded the back of my SUV with the most pathetic, unaesthetic, cheapest food I could find. When I got home, I didn't put it in the pristine stainless steel smart fridge in the kitchen. I carried it all down to the old chest freezer in the basement, a place Ashlyn was too terrified of spiders to ever set foot in. I left the turkeys completely frozen. I didn't brine them. I didn't thaw them. I just left them sitting in the icy dark, hard as granite. The night before Christmas Eve, the house was buzzing with Ashlyn's manic energy. She was running around with a clipboard, making Tyler move furniture, setting up a ring light in the corner of the dining room to record the event for her followers. "Eleanor," she yelled from the hallway, not even bothering to come into the room to speak to me. "Make sure the turkeys go in the oven by 10 a.m. tomorrow. We need the house to smell like rosemary and success when people walk in at 6. "Understood," I called back cheerfully. While they were distracted downstairs, I was in my bedroom, quietly packing a sleek, hard-shell suitcase. I packed my coziest cashmere sweaters, my favorite books, and all of my important legal documents, the trust paperwork, the PI's dossier, and the eviction notice. I had already booked a luxury cedar cabin up in the Cascade Mountains for the next 2 weeks. Paid in full. Non-refundable. Once my bags were hidden in the back of my closet, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. Tyler had insisted on upgrading our house to a fully integrated smart home 2 years ago. The thermostat, the security cameras, the electronic door locks, the Wi-Fi routers, everything was controlled via a central app. But because I was the one who actually paid the internet and utility bills, the master admin account was in my name. Tyler and Ashlyn only had guest access on their phones. With a few clicks, I changed the master password. I revoked their guest access. Then I turned my attention to the iPad Pro. Ashlyn had mounted it on the wall in the living room, right above the faux fireplace. She used it to control the Sonos speakers and play her lo-fi aesthetic chill beats during her videos. She had proudly announced that during the dinner, she was going to use it to cast her pitch deck to the massive OLED TV in the living room for Aunt Diane to see. I unmounted the iPad, brought it to my room, and plugged it into my laptop. I am 62, but I am not technologically illiterate. I spent 20 years working as an administrative manager for a logistics firm. I know my way around a macro. I created a new photo album on the iPad. I uploaded the high-resolution photo of the forged HELOC application. I uploaded the screenshots of the $42,000 collection notice. I uploaded the PI's report showing the 70,000 fake Russian bot followers. And, as the grand finale, I uploaded the screenshots of the text messages between Ashlyn and her father plotting to steal the house. I set the iPad's screensaver to trigger automatically. The moment anyone touched the screen or tried to cast to the TV, a programmed slideshow would begin. It wouldn't show a pitch deck for a lifestyle brand. It would broadcast a high-definition, unskippable presentation of Ashlyn's absolute financial and moral bankruptcy. I remounted the iPad on the wall, smoothing away my fingerprints with a microfiber cloth. I went to sleep that night with a resting heart rate of 60 beats per minute. I didn't toss and turn. I didn't cry for Tyler. I slept the deep, restorative sleep of a woman who had meticulously rigged the explosives and was simply waiting for dawn to hand over the detonator. At 6 a.m. on Christmas Eve, I woke up. The house was dead silent. I dressed in a warm turtleneck and boots. I carried my suitcase quietly down the stairs and set it by the front door. I walked into the kitchen for the last time. I went down to the basement, hauled the 3 rock-hard, frozen, $14 turkeys up the stairs, and placed them right in the center of the beautiful, pristine quartz island. They looked ridiculous, wrapped in their cheap plastic netting, radiating frost. Next to the turkeys, I placed the massive log of discount bologna and the cans of spray cheese. Finally, I pulled a blank index card from a drawer. I uncapped a Sharpie and wrote a single, pristine sentence in my best cursive handwriting. Enjoy the founder's dinner. The Wi-Fi is cut off and I am no longer a ghost. I placed the card right on top of the frozen poultry. I picked up my suitcase, walked out the front door, and locked the deadbolt behind me. The cold Seattle morning air hit my face, crisp and electrifying. I loaded my car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back in the rearview mirror once. It was time to head to the mountains. And it was time for Ashlyn and Tyler to wake up to the nightmare they had built for themselves. By 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I was officially off the grid. I had arrived at my rented cedar cabin nestled deep in the Cascade Mountains. The place was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a snow-dusted valley, a massive stone fireplace, and absolute, pristine silence. I unpacked my cashmere sweaters, arranged my legal documents neatly on the rustic coffee table, and popped the cork on a bottle of Stag's Leap Merlot that cost more than Ashlyn's weekly fake follower subscription. I settled into a plush leather armchair by the fire, picked up my phone, and opened my smart home app. Back in Seattle, it was 38 degrees and raining. Ashlyn's VIP Founders Dinner was scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. I imagined her running around the house in her beige silk slip dress, barking orders at Tyler, expecting the house to smell like roasted rosemary and truffle oil. I took a sip of my wine. I tapped the screen. Thermostat. Disabled. Override set to 50 degrees. Main Wi-Fi router. Offline. Security cameras. Offline. I set my phone face down on the table, and then I waited for the voicemails to start rolling in. Because I had blocked their numbers, the calls went straight to voicemail. I didn't listen to them immediately. I let them stack up like digital trophies. By 4:30 p.m., there were 14 voicemails from Tyler and 6 from Ashlyn. I poured myself a second glass of wine, pressed play, and put the phone on speaker. The first voicemail was from Tyler at 11:15 a.m. "Mom? Hey, where are you? Ashlyn just went into the kitchen and..." "Mom, the turkeys are frozen. Like solid ice. And what is with the spray cheese? Are you at the store? Please call me back. Ashlyn is having a panic attack." The second voicemail, 12:30 p.m., Tyler's voice was higher, laced with pure panic. "Mom, the Wi-Fi is down. Ashlyn can't access her Spotify aesthetic playlists or her digital check-in list for the guests. She's screaming at me. Also, the heat isn't working. It's freezing in here. Did you forget to pay the utility bill? Mom, please pick up the phone. Where is the real food?" The voicemails painted a beautiful, chaotic masterpiece of their afternoon. With no Wi-Fi, Ashlyn couldn't use her phone to quickly order premium catering or emergency charcuterie boards from local artisans. Because it was Christmas Eve, every decent restaurant was closed or completely booked. Tyler, the spineless enabler, was tasked with driving around in the freezing rain to find whatever food he could scrounge up for 20 VIP guests who had paid $450 a ticket for a luxury farm-to-table experience. From what I pieced together later, Tyler ended up at a strip mall. He bought 15 boxes of Papa John's pizza, a plastic tub of grocery store potato salad, and 3 gallons of generic fruit punch. Imagine it. At 6 p.m., 20 women, all aspiring influencers wearing their best neutral-toned blazers and carrying designer bags, pulled up to my beautiful Craftsman home. They had paid nearly $500,000 to network with Seattle's elite and learn the secrets of a 6-figure CEO. Instead, they walked into a house that was 50 degrees inside. There was no ambient jazz playing because the Sonos speakers required Wi-Fi. There was no roaring fire. There was just a panicked, shivering Ashlyn, wearing a heavy winter coat over her silk dress, standing next to a kitchen island that featured 3 rock-hard frozen discount turkeys, 2 cans of spray cheese, and a towering, greasy stack of Papa John's pizza boxes. And then Aunt Diane arrived. I didn't need voicemails to know how this part went. Aunt Diane actually called me the next morning to give me the play-by-play. Diane is a woman who wears tailored Armani suits and suffers absolutely zero fools. When she walked through the front door, expecting a sophisticated pitch dinner for a $50,000 seed investment, she took one look at the pizza boxes and the shivering, confused women in the living room, and her eyes narrowed into slits. "Ashlyn," Diane had barked, her voice echoing in the freezing, silent house. "What is the meaning of this? Is this some sort of avant-garde joke?" Ashlyn, hyperventilating and backed into a corner, tried to play the victim. According to Diane, Ashlyn burst into theatrical tears, claiming that her abusive, toxic mother-in-law had sabotaged her event out of jealousy and destroyed all the gourmet food she had spent days preparing. "She cut the heat! She cut the Wi-Fi! She's trying to ruin my brand, Aunt Diane!" Ashlyn sobbed, gesturing wildly to the frozen turkeys. "But as a CEO, I know how to pivot. Thank you all for your patience. Let's move into the living room for the mastermind pitch. Grab a slice of pizza, and let's talk about manifesting 6-figure months." The 20 women, muttering angrily and rubbing their arms for warmth, followed Ashlyn into the living room. They huddled on my vintage sofas. Aunt Diane stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, her expression lethal. Ashlyn grabbed the iPad from its wall mount. "I can't cast to the OLED TV because my mother-in-law spitefully cut the internet," Ashlyn announced to the room, putting on her brave, long-suffering smile. "But I have my pitch deck downloaded right here. Let's talk about the abundant CEO lifestyle." Ashlyn tapped the screen to wake it up. She didn't get her pastel-colored Canva presentation. She got my macro. The moment her acrylic nail tapped the glass, the iPad screen flashed bright white, and the automated slideshow triggered. But I hadn't just set it to play on the iPad. I had bought an HDMI adapter and hidden it behind the TV console. While Ashlyn was frantically setting up ring lights that morning, I had hardwired the iPad dock to the TV. The massive 75-inch OLED screen on the wall flickered to life. Slide 1. In crisp 4K resolution, the screen displayed the Midland Credit Management Collection notice. $42,750.80. Status delinquent. Below it, a side-by-side screenshot of the maxed-out Chase Sapphire card, highlighting the thousands of dollars spent at Revolve and Sephora. A collective gasp echoed through the freezing living room. Ashlyn shrieked. She jabbed frantically at the iPad screen, trying to close the app, but the macro had locked the interface. "Don't look at that! It's a virus! My mother-in-law hacked it." Slide 2. The TV transitioned smoothly to a spreadsheet from the Russian bot farm. It clearly showed Ashlyn's Instagram handle, the $400 monthly wire transfers, and the exact breakdown of her audience. Real followers, 12,500. Purchased bots, 72,500. "Wait," one of the VIP guests said, standing up from the sofa, her voice rising in anger. "Are you kidding me? We paid $400 for networking, and your entire following is fake? You're a fraud." "No! No, it's out of context!" Ashlyn screamed, her face turning a blotchy, panicked red. Tyler was frozen by the kitchen door, watching the absolute destruction of his wife's entire existence, too cowardly to step in. Then came the heavy hitter. Slide 3. The home equity line of credit application filled the massive screen. The $150,000 loan request. And zoomed in, right in the center, was the forged signature of Eleanor M. Vance. Below it was the bank's denial letter explicitly citing fraud prevention protocols. The room fell dead silent. Even the angry VIP guests stopped yelling. This wasn't just fake influencer drama anymore. This was a felony. Aunt Diane stepped forward. The temperature in the room, already freezing, seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "Ashlyn," Diane said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "Did you attempt to forge your mother-in-law's signature to take out a mortgage on this house?" "Aunt Diane, no! She's framing me! Tyler, tell her!" Ashlyn spun around, looking at her husband for a lifeline. Tyler opened his mouth, but before he could formulate a pathetic excuse, the final slide transitioned on the screen. Slide 4. The iMessage thread between Ashlyn and her father, Gary, displayed in massive blue and gray text bubbles for the entire room to read. "Gary, just keep wearing the boy down. He's soft, just like his father was. Once her name is off the deed, we can leverage the equity to clear your boards. Ashlyn, I know, Dad. I'm trying. If Diane doesn't give me the seed money, I'm dead. Gary, we need this too, Ash. Your mother's car is getting repossessed. It was the kill shot. Absolute, undeniable proof of a coordinated family grift. The silence that followed was so profound you could hear the rain hitting the roof. Aunt Diane pulled out her phone. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply looked at Ashlyn with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something you scrape off the bottom of your shoe. "You didn't invite me here to invest in a business," Diane said smoothly. "You invited me here to bail you and your pathetic father out of bankruptcy. You charged these women money to stand in a house you don't own, eating pizza, while you plotted to steal an elderly widow's only asset." "Diane, please," Ashlyn sobbed, falling to her knees. Her carefully curated aesthetic was completely shattered. She was just a broke, desperate con artist sobbing on my Moroccan rug. "Do not speak to me," Diane snapped. She turned to the 20 women in the room. "Ladies, I strongly suggest you initiate chargebacks on your credit cards immediately for whatever you paid this fraud. If any of you need legal representation to sue her in small claims court, here is my card. My corporate attorneys will be happy to assist you pro bono." Absolute chaos erupted. Women were shouting, demanding their money back. Someone threw a slice of Papa John's pizza, hitting the fake fiddle leaf fig tree. Coats were grabbed. Doors were slammed. Within 15 minutes, the house was completely empty of guests. Only Aunt Diane remained, standing by the front door. She looked at Tyler, who was pale, sweating, and shaking like a leaf. "Tyler," Diane said, her voice dripping with pity, "your father was a good man. Your mother is a saint for putting up with this for 4 years. And you are a pathetic, cowardly little boy who let a parasite feed on your family. Don't ever contact me again." She walked out, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind her, leaving Ashlyn and Tyler alone in the freezing, dark, pizza-scented ruins of their fake empire. Up in my cabin, I sat by the roaring fire. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Tyler. "Mom, please, come home. We need to talk. The cops are here." I smiled, took a final sip of my Merlot, and finally, blissfully, turned my phone off. I stayed in my cedar cabin for exactly 3 more days. I drank good wine, read 2 thriller novels, and watched the snow fall over the Cascade Mountains. I didn't turn my phone back on until the morning of December 28th. When I finally did, my screen practically froze from the sheer volume of notifications. There were dozens of texts from Tyler, oscillating between furious demands that I come home and pathetic, groveling apologies. There were unhinged, rambling voicemails from Ashlyn, threatening to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. There was even a highly satisfying text from Aunt Diane, which simply read, "Bravo, Eleanor. Let's get lunch next month." I deleted all the voicemails without listening to them. I packed my cashmere sweaters, loaded up my SUV, and drove back down the mountain. But I didn't go straight home. I pulled into the parking lot of the local police precinct, where Arthur Sterling, my impeccably dressed estate attorney, was waiting for me next to his Mercedes. Standing beside him were 2 uniformed Seattle police officers. "Ready, Eleanor?" Arthur asked, adjusting his silk tie. "More than I have ever been," I replied. We drove to my house in a tiny, intimidating convoy. When I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the smell hit me first. It was a potent, depressing mixture of stale Papa John's pizza, sour anxiety sweat, and the distinct odor of a rotting, unrefrigerated discount bologna log that had been sitting in the trash for 4 days. Tyler and Ashlyn were in the living room. They looked like the survivors of a shipwreck. Ashlyn was wearing the same stained sweatpants she had likely put on after the disastrous dinner. Her hair was a greasy, tangled mess, and the curated, minimal aesthetic of the room was completely trashed. When they heard the door open, Tyler jumped up from the sofa. "Mom!" "Oh my God, where have you been? You can't just—" He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the 2 police officers step into the foyer behind me, followed closely by Arthur, who was carrying a sleek leather briefcase. Ashlyn's face drained of all color. She practically shrank into the cushions of my vintage sofa. What is this? Why are the cops here?" "Good morning," I sadly said, my voice as crisp and cold as the December air outside. "Officers, this is Ashlyn Vance, the woman I spoke to you about." The taller officer stepped forward, pulling a notepad from his belt. "Ma'am, we're here regarding a formal complaint of identity theft and attempted mortgage fraud. We have copies of a home equity line of credit application submitted to the Seattle Credit Union featuring a forged signature belonging to Mrs. Eleanor Vance. The bank has already flagged the application and will be taking you down to the station for an official statement." Ashlyn burst into loud, theatrical tears. "It was a mistake. I didn't forge anything. I was just filling out the paperwork to see what our options were. I was going to ask her to sign it. Tyler, tell them I was just researching." She looked at her husband, desperate for him to throw himself on the grenade one last time. But Tyler was staring at Arthur's briefcase. "Mom," Tyler whispered, his voice shaking. "Mom, please, don't press charges. You're going to ruin her life. She'll have a felony record. She'll never get a job. Please, we're family." "You are not my family," I said, the words slipping out of my mouth with terrifying ease. "Family does not steal from family. Family does not treat a grieving widow like a free catering service. And family certainly does not sit in a coffee shop and beg their mother to endure a scam so they can pay off a Nordstrom credit card." I turned to Arthur. "Arthur, if you would?" Arthur stepped forward, snapping the latches of his briefcase open. He pulled out a thick legal document printed on heavy stock paper and handed it to Tyler. "Mr. Vance, Mrs. Vance," Arthur began, his voice booming with the authority of a judge. "I am Arthur Sterling, legal counsel for the Eleanor M. Vance Irrevocable Trust. This is a formal, legally binding 30-day notice of eviction. You have exactly 1 month to vacate this premises. If you are not gone by 8 a.m. on January 28th, the sheriff will be called to forcibly remove you and your belongings will be placed on the curb." Tyler stared at the paper like it was written in an alien language. The what trust?" "The Irrevocable Trust," Arthur clarified with a shark-like smile. "Your mother no longer technically owns this house. The trust does. And upon her passing, the entirety of the estate will be liquidated and donated to the Seattle Animal Rescue. You have been explicitly and legally disinherited, Tyler. You get nothing. Not the house, not the equity, not a single dime." Tyler dropped the paper. It fluttered to the Moroccan rug, landing right next to Ashlyn's fuzzy, overpriced designer slippers. "Mom," Tyler choked out, tears finally spilling over his eyelashes. He took a step toward me, reaching out a trembling hand. "Mom, I'm your son. I'm your only child. You can't do this to me. I'm sorry. I was stupid. I was blind. But I love you. Please, I'll divorce her. I'll kick her out right now. Just don't cut me off." I looked at the boy I had raised. I thought about the thousands of hours I had spent nurturing him, the sacrifices his father and I had made to ensure he started his adult life without a penny of debt. And I realized with absolute clarity that my job as his mother was done. I had raised a man. What he chose to become after that was entirely on him. "You don't love me, Tyler," I said softly, looking him dead in the eye. "You love the convenience of me. You love that I was a human shield between you and the consequences of your own cowardice. You stood by and watched this woman try to steal the roof over my head, and you told me to endure it." I stepped back, putting distance between us. You chose a parasite over your mother. Now you get to live with her. You have 30 days to get out of my house. And if I ever find out you've tried to contact my bank, my lawyer, or me again, I will file a restraining order." I turned to the police officers. "She's all yours, gentlemen." As I walked out of the living room and headed upstairs to my bedroom to unpack, the sound of Ashlyn sobbing and Tyler pleading faded away. I locked my door, walked over to the window, and looked out at the street. I had never felt so incredibly light. Epilogue, 1 year later. The sun is blindingly bright in Boca Raton, Florida. It's a Tuesday afternoon in February, and it's a perfect 78 degrees. I'm sitting on the lanai of my newly purchased 3-bedroom luxury condominium overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, sipping an iced tea and watching the palm trees sway. A lot can happen in a year. True to Arthur's word, Tyler and Ashlyn were out of my Seattle house by the end of January. They didn't have a choice. Aunt Diane had kept her promise to the VIP guests. A handful of them banded together and successfully sued Ashlyn in small claims court for the ticket fees. Between the lawsuits, the crushing credit card debt, and the legal fees required to fight the felony fraud charges, they were completely, utterly bankrupt. Ashlyn didn't go to prison, first-time offender, and her lawyer managed to plead it down to a misdemeanor forgery charge, but she was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. Her aesthetic influencer career is dead and buried. The internet is forever, and the leaked screenshots of her fake Russian bots and her text messages with her father went viral on a Reddit snark page. The last I heard through the family grapevine, the abundant CEO is currently working a minimum wage shift at a strip mall tanning salon to pay off her court-ordered restitution. As for Tyler, he finally found his spine, though it was much too late. He filed for divorce in March. Without my house to live in, and with his credit score completely annihilated by his ex-wife, he couldn't even qualify for a decent apartment lease. He's currently renting a dingy 400-square-foot studio apartment in a terrible part of Tacoma. Every month, like clockwork, he sends me a handwritten letter. He writes about how sorry he is, how much he misses me, how he's going to therapy to work on his conflict avoidance issues. He begs for a phone call. Every month I take a red Sharpie, write return to sender across the envelope, and drop it right back in the mail. Forgiveness is a beautiful concept, but access to my life is a privilege, and he permanently revoked his own VIP pass. As for me, once they were gone, I hired a professional staging company, a real one, not an Instagram fake, and put the Seattle house on the market. It sold in 4 days for $150,000 over the asking price. I packed up 30 years of memories, said a quiet, peaceful goodbye to Richard, and boarded a first-class flight to Florida. I bought this condo in cash. I joined a local country club where I play tennis twice a week with a group of vibrant, hilarious women who actually appreciate my cooking when I choose to host a dinner party. I have a passport full of new stamps, a bank account protected by an ironclad trust, and a home that is entirely, undeniably my own. I spent 4 years being a ghost in my own life, haunting the hallways while ungrateful people feasted on my generosity. But not anymore. I am alive, I am free, and I am the only CEO of my own damn life. And my Wi-Fi? It's working perfectly.